Bright QT. Every student matters.
Hello everyone, my name is Anupriya. Now let's start our first chapter of class 10, that is the rise of nationalism in Europe. But students, before starting our first chapter, let us have a brief recap of what you read in class 9. Now in class 9th, you learnt about the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, rise of Nazism, and at last but not the least, the Indian national movement. Now here we will talk about the French Revolution in short. Why? Because the topic that we are going to learn today is totally related to the French Revolution, as in what happened after the French Revolution and how the idea of nationalism emerged in Europe. Now you must remember that the French Revolution, it took place in the year 1789. Okay. Now students, the French Revolution was the first clear expression of nationalism that emerged in Europe. Yes. Now it was after the French Revolution that led to the transfer of sovereignty from the monarch to a body of French citizens. Now you must be remembering that you already have learnt all these important points in your class 9 paper, right? There you learnt about the French Revolution, what were the circumstances that led to this big revolution in France. And this revolution not only brought changes in Europe, but it had repercussions all over the world, right? Each and every area that, for example, India, it also was affected by this French Revolution, right? Later on in the 19th century. And that led to the emergence of this idea of nationalism in Europe. Now, talking about the French Revolution and relating it to our first chapter here, that is rise of nationalism. It is really important for us to understand what was the political or social condition in France or all over Europe, right? So here in our first part, that is introduction, we are going to understand the situation in Europe during the Middle Ages. Now while I am talking about the Middle Ages, you must know the timeline here. Somewhere between 500 AD to 1500 AD. Okay? Now here, during the Middle Ages, the condition in Europe was very much different. The idea of nationalism or of a nation was not known to the people. So what was the condition here? Let us learn point by point. So here the first term is allegiance. Now what do we understand by the term allegiance? It means loyalty, okay, towards a nation. So basically this loyalty towards a nation, this feeling of loyalty towards a nation was missing in Europe, or it was unknown to the people living in this region. Now what were the reasons that this feeling of loyalty was missing among the people there? The first reason was the Christians who were living in Western Europe, they belonged to the Catholic Church. At that time, religion was more important than this feeling of nationalism or feeling of belonging to a nation. Okay? So basically in this period, the Christians who were living in Western Europe, they were mainly the Catholics. Okay? The educated people, they used Latin language. Now the Latin language was the classical language. During this period, it belonged to the Indo-European language group. Okay? So people here who were educated, who knew how to read and write, they used this Latin language. Apart from that, everyone lived under the Holy Roman Empire. Now, for example, today we know all the countries' name like India, France, Italy, Germany and so on. But at that time, do you think this idea of nation was known to the people? Or they called themselves as Indians or French or Germans and so on? No, students. At that time, people lived under one empire. They owed their allegiance to one ruler, or they were loyal to one ruler. Okay? So here you have to understand that during the Middle Ages, everyone lived under the Holy Roman Empire. Now let's have a look at this image here. You can see the map. Now this is the map of the Holy Roman Empire during the Middle Ages. This is the map of Europe, I must say that. So you can see the red boundary here. This is the boundary of the Holy Roman Empire, and as you can see, different provinces, right? During that period, there was no concept of a defined territory that we have today, right? So people knew that they belonged to this Holy Roman Empire and different rulers were ruling in different regions. But after some time, three main developments, or let's say major developments, took place in Europe. You have to remember what were these three major developments. So the first development was the idea of Renaissance. The second was Reformation, and the third one was rise of strong dynasties and kingdoms in different regions such as England, France, Germany and so on. Now there are two terms that you must understand now. The first one is Renaissance and the second one is Reformation. How these three developments it led or it brought changes in Europe. We are going to understand that now. Now Renaissance. What do we understand by the term Renaissance? Do you know that? If not, you have to know that it was the revival of European art and literature. It led to the rise of vernacular literature. Now this is a new term for you, that is vernacular. What do we understand by vernacular? Now it was the ordinary language that was spoken by the ordinary people living in a particular region. Okay? So now people started speaking a particular language who were defined in a particular area. Okay? So this Renaissance, it means the revival of art and literature in Europe. During which period? So it is around 15th, 16th century. Now this was a period of transition from the Middle Age to the modernity or the modern age. As you can see in the image, this image describes the Renaissance period, coming up of philosophers, thinkers who gave new ideas and also revived the art and literature in Europe. The second term for you was Reformation. Now what do we understand by Reformation? So it was a religious movement that led to the establishment of Protestant churches. Now a while ago we learned that all the Christians who were living in Western Europe, they belonged to the Catholic churches, right? They believed in Catholic. Basically they were Catholics, right? But here what do we see? We see that this idea of Reformation or the Reformation movement that began, it broke away from the idea of Catholicism or the practice of Catholicism. So now it led to the establishment of Protestant churches and a new belief that started here. So you have to remember these 2 points here. And the third point was rise in the kingdoms or dynasties. Now moving on. Another point that you have to understand that till now we are learning about the three developments that took place in Europe, and because of these developments major changes took place. But it was in the 19th century that nationalism, it became a force and brought about intellectual and political changes, right? So basically, what do we see in the 19th century? In 19th century Europe, a new term or a new idea was introduced in Europe that was not known to the people who were living before that period. This idea was the idea of nation and the idea of nationalism that came through that. Okay, students? But the first clear expression of nationalism was given through the French Revolution that took place in the year 1789. Very important point here. In 19th century, now people started to have or to share a commonness. So it was only in the 19th century that people, they had a feeling of shared belongingness towards a common territory, towards their nation, towards the people with whom they were living. Here we are going to understand that idea of nation. Okay? So, the new nation states that had emerged had centralized power with clear defined territory. Now, students, we took the example of Holy Roman Empire. Now, all the people who were living in the Holy Roman Empire, they owed their allegiance to one king, one ruler in their province, right? But here what do we see in the 19th century? In 19th century, we see that the new nation states that developed were quite different from the multinational dynasties. Okay? So at first in 18th century, what do we observe? In 18th century, there were these multinational dynasties, the Habsburg Empire or the French, the German, Russians and so on, different empires, right? But in the 19th century, there was a clear-cut nation state and it had a defined territory, okay? Not only the ruler, but the common people also shared a common identity and history. Now students, here I am going to stress on the word that is common. Very much important when we are talking about the idea of nation or nationalism. Because it is only through this feeling of shared belongingness or the common identity or the common thoughts that all the people, they came together and they started to believe in the idea of nation state. Taking the example of our country India, today people from different religions, communities live in our nation. Am I correct? Yes. Now all these people, they belong to different religions, they speak different languages, but they know that they belong to this country India. So foremost for us, this is our nation, that is India, and we are Indians, right? So we have this common idea, okay? Likewise, in Europe, this whole idea came into this process in 19th century. So just remember all these keywords here, that is common identity, common history, common heritage and so on. Now comes the main question, as in what is nation? Because the whole chapter is all about the idea of nationalism or the idea of nation, right? So here we have to understand what is a nation. A nation is described as a community of people who believe that they have a common homeland and share a sense of belongingness derived from the experience of common traditions and historical developments. Yes, you have to remember this definition and it's really important. Okay, students? Now let's have a look at this image here. Can you identify the image? This is a broad cutout of the Europe region, the nation. So what are we reading here? Let's have a look at the keywords. Here, nation is described as a community of people. It means a lot of people living in this region, right? Now, who believe that they have a common homeland. Now, common homeland can be any region here inside this defined territory, right? So, they have a common homeland and they share a sense of belongingness. Now, how does this sense of belongingness come? It is only through the common tradition and the historical developments. So, in Europe, after the French Revolution, there was this idea of shared belongingness among people, that they have to fight for their own rights and their own nation, right? So, the national flag came into being and national song came into being and so many other developments took place. You already have learnt about it in your previous class. Here you have to understand that there is a common territory, shared belongingness, common tradition and historical developments and a common homeland with defined territory. Okay? So, this is the cutout of Europe region. Likewise, I was giving you the example of our country India, right? So, this is our country, students. This is the physical map of our country. Now, in our country, we have a defined territory. You are aware of that? Yes. Now, in this territory, different people belonging to different regions or speaking different languages or following different cultures, they are living here. But they have one thing in common, that they are living in this common homeland, right? And they have a shared past, a common past or a shared past that binds everyone together. Now, this is how the idea of nation or nationalism, it came into being. Okay? A nation comprises citizens who live in common territory, are conscious about their common culture and heritage, and have a voice in their common government. I told you that we have to emphasize on the word common here. Okay? So, here you can see everywhere, whenever we are talking about nation, the word common is quite common, right? So, everywhere we are using the term common. So, common territory, common culture, heritage, and also having a voice in their common government. Can you relate it with our country India? Yes, we have a central government, then we have state governments, right? Apart from that, we have a common territory and also definitely we are conscious about our common culture, be it in southern India, be it in northern India, eastern or western India, right? So, there is a common past or a shared past that is binding everyone together. And this is how the idea of nation came into being. And it led to the rise of nationalism, whether it's Europe, it's our country India. But specifically, here we are going to talk about Europe. Okay? So, here you can see this is a depiction for the idea of nationalism or nation. Now, another important point that you have to remember is that a definition of nation that was given by Ernst Renan. The name Ernst Renan, here you can see this is the image of Renan and he was a great historian. He gave this idea of definition of nation. This is a long definition of nation. Here what I am going to do, I am going to point out the major keywords and we will focus on these keywords and we will try to understand what does it mean. So, according to the definition given by Ernst Renan, a nation is the culmination of long past of endeavors. Here the term endeavors, it means trying to achieve something. Okay? Sacrifice and devotion. Yes, students. Nation did not come like this only. It was not all of a sudden that in Europe, people felt this shared belongingness or they felt that they have a common past. No, it was really a long past of trying something to achieve. In Europe, it was the independence or the people fighting for their own rights. to have a common homeland where they could exercise their rights, right? Apart from that, sacrifice and devotion, everyone who participated in the revolution, they had to sacrifice, they devoted their life towards the nation, right? The patriotic feeling, the loyalty towards the nation, okay? Now, to have a common glories in the past, to have a common will in the present, to have performed great deeds together, and to wish to perform more. Now, this is the whole idea of nation, students, according to the great historian here, that is Ernst Renan. He also says that a nation is therefore large-scale solidarity. Solidarity, that is a feeling of brotherhood, a feeling of commonness, okay? That its existence is a daily plebiscite. Now, what is the term plebiscite here? What does it mean? The term plebiscite here, it means a direct vote given to the people or through a proposal that they have to reject or choose the proposal. Okay, so this is the direct vote given to the people living in a particular territory or a particular region. So they have to either accept the proposal or they have to reject the proposal. And based on this idea, there exists the whole nation. Now, this is what Ernst Renan said. Now, students, this was all about the introduction or the idea of nation and nationalism. Here we are going to solve some of the important questions given in your exercise section. So, you will notice that in multiple choice questions, the first question here is the first clear expression of nationalism in Europe came with. Now, four options are the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, or the Industrial Revolution. Now, you already know the answer. Here we have talked about only one revolution in detail, and the name is French Revolution. So, the correct answer of this question will be B. The second question in multiple choice questions is, nationalism brought about in Europe the emergence of. The four options are the nation states, the modern states, multinational dynastic states, and alliances formed among many European states. Again, you must know the answer here. You have learned about the term nation right again, right? So, here the answer is A, the nation states, not the modern states nor the multinational dynastic states. So, it was a transition from this multinational to the nation states. The third question in the multiple choice questions is, the term plebiscite means. The four options are adult franchise, a direct vote by which all people of a region are asked to accept or reject a proposal, when the rich and the aristocrats select their leaders, and last, a vote by the people to elect their leaders. Now, like I told you right now, the correct answer here is B, a direct vote by which all people of a region are asked to accept or reject a proposal. We already have learnt it through the definition given by Ernst Renan, that people who are living in a region, they are asked for certain questions, as in if there is any issue, and people, they have to decide through a vote. Now, this is the direct vote in which either people can accept or reject the proposal, right, presented to them. So, thank you.